It's a bright light, but a pleasant light. Oh, I wish I was a dungeon master. Oh shit, I am. Alrighty. Huckleberry mead. So you'll be freed of your intelligence. Ah! Who? Looks like the camera's on. That means it's time to say greetings, programs. Drungens and Dragons here with another episode. Let's all figure out how to play D&D better than we used to. So no matter how good you're playing it, you can always play just a little bit better. I'm Hank and Furnail. Welcome back. And I tell you what, this has been a journey of the mind to reach today. So we've got another drinking review on our hands. Haven't done one of these in a little while, but I figured what the hell. Might as well drink an entire bottle of Huckleberry mead and sit here and rant and rave for a little while like I used to back in the old days. Now, before we get into it though, here's to you. So get yourself a bottle or a glass of something delicious and get comfy, put on your pajamas, press pause, I'll wait. Okay, welcome back and let's have a drink together. I guess technically I didn't need to freeze, since if you press pause I would have stopped moving in your universe, but in mine I imagined. Okay, there I go, getting in the weeds again. What is today's drinking review all about? Well, a few months ago, I don't even, it must have been like early spring, I did a drinking review. I sat down and drank a whole bottle of Hidden Legend. I believe it was the King's Mead, which is awesome stuff, by the way. Buy their products. Sat down, drank the whole damn thing, and played out some test scenarios in DungeonWorld. That video got a ton of views, and I think a lot of people are thinking about DungeonWorld. It's got a nice buzz around it and all that. And so I find myself continually returning to this book. I mean, look at my copy of DungeonWorld here. It's got the curl, you guys. It's got the curl. You know what that means. That means you're like working it, you're setting it down. I had like some coffee on this thing. Like, I've been really delving, get it? Into DungeonWorld, into the book, and getting way in there and trying to figure out why I'm so damn intrigued with DungeonWorld. And I gotta tell you, the more I read, the more I like it, and the more my early critiques of it are starting to fade away because I'm seeing more and more the elegance of what they built. Now, I've got my DM's tome here, and you know my rule. If you really want to learn, anytime you are reading, you're also writing. So I've got DungeonWorld Part 2 right here, and these are all my notes as I was, trying to figure out what is it about DungeonWorld that is so awesome, that has so captured my imagination, and what does it mean for my game? Oh man, I got a video on my hands. Everybody out there who's trying to DM really good and trying to learn different systems and get their players all involved and be awesome, man, they gotta hear this. I just had a boom, DungeonWorld. You guys remember the last read and review, drink and read, read and drink, about DungeonWorld, and I bet since then you've got a copy and you've been sitting at home experimenting with DungeonWorld all by yourself because you don't want to ask your friends over to play DungeonWorld because you have no clue how to run a session, and you're like, okay, I think the goblin jumps on me, so I use my ragged sword and attempt to gut him. Okay, that triggers a hack and slash move, so I'm gonna go for it. Ooh, I rolled a 4. Man, that is a terrible roll. So not only do I fail to do damage to him, the weapon hits the ground and makes a loud clang that echoes through the dungeon. 5 more goblins appear. Okay, so 5 more goblins appear. No, don't use dice, don't use minis. Well shit, 5 more goblins appear. I call out to my ancestors. I lift my ragged axe above my head and strike it on the ground, trying to send out a shockwave of fear amongst them. Okay, well, I remember in the last adventure you got a new move called the Intimidating Wave. This definitely triggers that move, so roll your 2d6. It's a 7. So you're barely successful. 1 orc runs for his life. The others stop in their tracks and don't attack. You have 1 more turn before they unleash. Well, the nearest one, I'll grab him by the wrist and shove the axe into his ribcage. That's a hack and slash. Roll for it. Ooh, 11. Now you're faced with a choice. You can either do an extra d6 of damage or negate his attack. Well, screw negating his attack. I'm not afraid. I got 3 armor, man. I'm plated up. So I'll do the extra d6 of damage. All right, I do the d10 because I'm a fighter. Boosh! Ooh, maximum 10. Ooh, 16! Double dice maximum. So you completely missed the orc. His ribs blow out his back of his, what's left of him. There's a mushroom cloud in the shape of an orc. And 1d6 of them flee in terror at the incredible strike. Oh, and I roll max again. So that's all of them. They all just ran away because I iced that dude so hard. There's no minis. It's a non-spatial universe. Dungeon World is a narrative universe. Also, I rolled the 11, greater than a 10. I was faced with a choice, negate an attack or add a d6 in damage. I rolled a 4, which is way under 6. Failure time. So not only did I fail at what I was doing, I incurred more circumstances and more negative situations. Also, triggering a move. Last session, as I was saying, like I earned some cool new move, and the fact that I went for this, yes, you triggered it. Do your new move, which is intimidating wave or whatever. So that's not all the mechanics in Dungeon World, but it's several of them. And if you haven't gotten into the book, please do it. Death mechanic is totally awesome. Okay, so that's Dungeon World, yo. That's it. It's rolling 2d6, it's beating 10s, class-based damage, and triggering moves with word tags, right? And tags are awesome. Tags can be on weapons, they can be on monsters, they can be in environments. Now, the first time that I drank and reviewed Dungeon World, I was a little cranky as I was getting into their source material, like their world material. You know, what's in the world, what makes a monster, all this kind of stuff. I was like, man, all these monsters are is like 2 stats and 3 little moves and a description. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Oh my God, it's awesome. Moves, you guys, moves, which are the bread and butter of Dungeon World, are totally fantastic. What is a move? A move is kind of like a numeric setup for cool things. So when do moves happen? Well, in my mind, and I'm sure different DMs would describe it in different terms, but a move is triggered by a narrative action. So a player says, I want to blah with the bling. The word bling happens to be that word tag that I'm looking for as the dungeon master to go, aha, yes, that triggers blah. So the simple one would be, I take my sword, and as I'm right next to him, I reach around the neck and shove the sword through him with a piercing thrust. Ah, piercing thrust. Okay, roll for hack and slash. You accomplish it. Go for it. A more interesting one would be intimidating wave, which I totally just made up. So I've given my paladin a new move called intimidating wave because he leveled up and I hate using the book. Intimidating wave is triggered anytime he uses his ragged axe, which is an heirloom of his family, in an intimidating manner other than attacking. Frighten 1d6 enemies around him, something like that, something simple. So for him to trigger that move, he needs to say, you know, I hold it aloft, or I light it on fire, I hit the ground with it, I lick the blood off of it, you know, stuff like that. And then that triggers intimidating wave, roll your 2d6. Okay, that's moves. So I got a little bit into it there, but that's moves. That's Dungeon World. That's one of the key concepts is moves. And they're constantly being added and improvised and created. And when you're making adventures and modules and monsters and weapons, you are making tags and moves. You're making word triggers and moves that go with them. And there's moves. There's moves all over the place. Players are writing down moves. It's the main thing they're writing down. Weapons don't have pluses and all this crazy stat stuff on them. They have tags and sometimes can trigger certain moves. Okay, when I first got into Dungeon World, I thought, it's all kind of hand-waving over the real details, you know? A D&D monster has range, has area of effect, it has descriptions of the spells it's casting and the different mobs that can hoard around it and how big of spaces they occupy and how fast they move on. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's cool. So the fact that Dungeon World doesn't have that is what makes it not cool. That's what I thought at first. But then it dawned on me the real essence of Dungeon World. The real essence of Dungeon World is that it's a narrative technique. The reason it's a non-spatial world Meaning you will not find things in Dungeon World that talk about 5, 10 feet, 15 feet cone and all this kind of stuff. No, because it's a narrative space. It's not a literal space. Now, can you play Dungeon World with cool minis and grids and stuff? Hell yeah. You can come up with all kinds of cool scenarios to use. You're just not bound by specific movement numbers, range numbers, and area numbers. It's much more improvised and much more narrative. So what dawned on me is that Dungeon World is not weak because of this. This is the strength it has. Why does it take me so long to create all the details that go into a good D&D session? Because A, I like to make it really good and thorough and awesome, but B, it's kind of how you have to do it. Now, if you're producing a Dungeon World encounter or a night worth of Dungeon World gameplay, I think you actually have to do a lot less preparation. And damn, that's pretty appealing to me as a dungeon master, right? So, what are you getting at here, Hankerin? What's your real point? Well, I kind of have a test scenario set up here, which is, I have the Frozen King, which is actually just an Arthas action figure that I found like in an old box. He's in front of this glowing, the Order of the Hammer stained glass window, and he's kind of in this little mini dungeon. There's a doorway separating this corridor and this room. He has his 2 hounds, a large switch, and these mysterious spike pits out here beside the bridge. So I've set up a little test scenario here to kind of think about the difference between a D&D encounter and a D&D setup and a Dungeon World setup. I have Hanker Infernale right here. We have Alzheimer, our wizard, and we have Stills, our goblin rogue. He steps on the bridge, and the minute he does, these 2 spike traps spring up and go for a sandwich move. He gets to make a dex save. A dex save is a D&D concept. Whoops. So what happens is Stills goes, well, as the spikes are closing in on me, I jump out of the way. Aha. Then you dare to defy danger. So defy danger is one of the common moves in Dungeon World. He rolls his 2d12 plus dex. Oh, nice. So he succeeds, but not with flying colors, and he manages to jump backward. The spike traps retract into their original position, and Stills says, the bridge is trapped. Now in D&D, he would be making a dex save, which is a very similar concept, but he would say, against what? Well, that's where we get our room DC, right? So usually I have this dice set out, and it's on like, say, 17. So all of our saves in this room are going to be 17. You guys are familiar with the way that I do that. It's 1 DC for the whole room. That way you're not making multiple DCs, 1 challenge level. So then he gets his D20, and he's got his dex bonus, which is 3, 16. He misses it by 1. He takes the damage from the spikes. The key differences you can see there are a variable target, right? Everything in Dungeon World works on the same numeric targets. Sometimes you have a little more bonus and sometimes not, but the numeric target never changes. Imagine in D&D if every single roll was trying to beat a 17. That would be sort of Dungeon World-ish. But D&D has variable targets. And variable targets are something that all D&D players and DMs have come to love and use a lot. So this is a big part of your preparation as a DM with D&D. Figuring out the DCs. What's his armor class? Because I make all my monsters usually. I kind of base them on the monster manual, but I make them all. So what's his armor class? Well, that's just a target. All the monsters don't have the same armor class. You want some to be easier than hit than others. Well, not if you play in Dungeon World, dude. Dungeon World, you are successful at hacking and slashing, not successful at hitting a guy. Armor is subtracted from damage in Dungeon World, not a factor that creates a variable in hitting or missing. So you see, there's a lot of key differences, okay? But I'm, again, getting in the weeds. So let's say they figure out a way across here. They use levitation. They open up the door like fools. And let's just get rid of the door. Sure enough, the king is in there.
Who dares disturb my sleep?
Hanker Infernale, you destroyer, you old coot. Now I'll have your head and be done with it. So will you fight or just give it to me? Hounds, attack, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now, in D&D, we would be working out initiative, we would be working out move distances, armor classes, variable hit rates, and all that stuff. But in Dungeon World, the way that my instincts just went to just describe what was happening to you, what I think one of my viewers was calling play D&D by yourself, which is what I was doing. You know, blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Hey, I'm alone in a room. Man, is this fun? That instinct, that way of describing what's happening is very close to an actual Dungeon World session. Whoever Dungeon World DM is going to bridge the gap between the math and the triggering of moves and the using of his design, of his game design, and natural conversational narrative. It has moves of its own. Anytime someone looks at it or makes a kill, like the window has a move that's triggered, like Inspire Terror or Make Slave or Show Visions of the Underworld, you know, stuff like that. You can chow through this room in, I would say, probably 45 minutes, whereas it take 2 to 3 hours in D&D. Okay, now we get to the meat of what I'm talking about. I've been rambling too long already. My first thought was, if I can do less prep and get through more content faster, I gotta go with Dungeon World, man. This is where it's at. It's not like I need the D&D books to be guiding me. Now, some of you guys who are new to D&D out there, you need the books to give you, like, what is a monster? What's an encounter? How do I build a dungeon? Like, what's the damage on a halberd? You gotta get all that stuff. You need that working knowledge to make the game balance. But if you've already got all that, just off the top of your head, you could easily jump into a freeform space like Dungeon World and kick ass. You just invent all your spells, invent all your monsters, invent your character progression, just come up with it and tell your awesome story and do your twists and turns, and your good guy becomes your bad guy, and then the freaking Spider Queen is your mom and stuff like that. Right? You could execute all those ideas much faster and cleaner using Dungeon World. So in my mind, I was like, well, screw it. Let's play Dungeon World instead. So that's why I've been doing all the research on Dungeon World, because I've been playing D&D for decades, and I've been reading Dungeon World for less than a year, so I got a lot of work to do, right? Friday night we held our second group tribunal. So if you guys aren't familiar with this, this is where you get your players together not to play. So you get your players together to have a beer, sit around the fire, and talk about the game and what they want out of the game. If you want to gamify the tribunal, you can give each player 3 chips, and you're going to ask 5 questions. You can only answer with an opinion if you throw a chip in, so it lets people kind of control what they really have an opinion about rather than everybody just bloody-blying. And then you ask clutch questions like, do you guys want to see planar travel and like Cthulhu-y crazy shit in the game? You want to see like Doctor Strange stuff? Another one was, do you guys want to continue the story that we're doing, or do you want to start something new, maybe that's in the same world, that has something to do with the story, but you know. So I asked them that one, and unanimously they're all throwing in chips and saying, we got to continue the story. 1 year is not enough. So, whoa, okay. Another question I asked with a total agenda on my mind was, do you guys want to stick with D&D 5th edition or go to Dungeon World? And then I gave them a rough overview of what Dungeon World would be like. A few of them have seen the book, what the classes are like and stuff. Despite everyone's enthusiasm about Dungeon World, they unanimously told me they wanted to stick with D&D 5th edition. Whoa. So as the DM, I've been putting all this work into understanding Dungeon World so I can be like, behold the new tome. It's nice and small and softback, and you can all afford it, and it's easy to carry around, unlike this ridiculous, what is this? Come on, guys. Like, do we really need this format? I mean, I know it lets you charge twice as much for the books, but this is way cooler. So anyways, they basically told me straight up, we're sticking with D&D 5th edition, dude. So here I am at the video. Whew, that was just the intro. That was like 20 minutes of drinking and ranting just to get you where I am after this mental journey. So we're coming in here and we're fighting the Frozen King and his 2 hounds in front of the stained glass window, the trapped bridge. There's a big lever here. You throw this lever and the the bridge trap will no longer go off, so Alzheimer can make it across and begin casting spells. He gets rid of the hounds before too long, and then it's mano y mano con Frozen King. So he's like steps down, he begins casting all his ice magic, he does a bunch of blowback magic, knocks Stills off into the spikes, Hankerin manages to dig his heels against him, goes in, engages in melee combat, Alzheimer has to hide, Stills climbs up, on and on it goes. What's the realization, Hankerin? So you wanted to do Dungeon World, and your players all told you, nah, we want to stick with 5th edition D&D, probably because they know the progression of the characters, they looked ahead in the player's guide, they see what's coming for them at higher levels, and they want to do it. They're starting to get better at the game, so they don't want to reboot and do something they're new at. It all makes total sense. But as the Dungeon Master, what you going to do now, B? You got all this new comprehension. What are you going to do? This is where I had my epiphany. I thought that the key contribution of Dungeon World was this right here, the 2d6 mechanic. The success mechanic is all it is. It's static success targets, and it's using 2d6 all the damn time. I mean, as much or more as you use a d20 in D&D. And it's fun rolling 2d6, you get to add. I thought that was the real guts of Dungeon World, was the mechanical innovation of a simpler success mechanic, but I was totally wrong. I don't need the 2d6 success mechanic to get what's good out of Dungeon World, and neither do you if you want to keep playing D&D, because you already spent the money on the books and your players want to keep playing it. Dungeon World is brilliant because it's a narrative technique. It teaches you, shows you, and innovates upon how to execute the game session itself, the conversation that is sitting down with your friends and playing D&D. A lot of people have been asking me on the channel, dude, how do I get into this? This is a big cloud of information, and like, I get it that there's monsters and we're gonna go on adventures and stuff, but no one actually wants to sit down and describe to me what we do when we sit and play. And so as a newcomer, especially as a dungeon master, you can really make some bum moves. You know, you can have a really boring session, or you can be evil and mean and like way overwhelm people, or you can just not know the game very well and be bumbling around and having to look up rules, and it's just unbearably non-fun. So it's finally time, you guys. It's time to sit down and say, how do you have the role-playing conversation? How do you have the RPG tabletop experience? I'll tell you how do you do it. You use the kinds of word structures that are being built in Dungeon World. They have key sentences and phrase structures that they say over and over, like, when you bloody blah, you bloody blah. So anytime a player lifts his weapon into the air, he does intimidating wave. So as the DM, I constantly have this microcurrency to pay my characters, because my characters are going, well, I see the orcs coming and I wouldn't just attack. I would hold up my father's axe and call upon his spirit. The player didn't say, I do intimidating wave. That's the D&D way, right? I cast intimidating wave. Okay, good job. Roll for this, whatever. The player just narratively described what the... Sorry, the TIE Fighter pilot helmet just appeared on my head. Okay. The moves give the DM a microcurrency to pay the players every time the players do excellent narrative expression, right? So you're not just triggering moves left and right. You're not just casting spells and all that kind of stuff. It gives the DM a way to say, there's your thing, there's your thing. Okay, that's one way you can do it in Dungeon World. So what's the big epiphany? Okay, I'm trying to get around to what this big epiphany is. The big epiphany is that the value of Dungeon World is not in the mechanical component, it is in the narrative technique. So Hankerin Fernail, it's time to bring it home, baby. How do you apply the Dungeon World narrative technique to D&D 5th edition? There's the freaking meat of the damn video. Damn, that was a long journey. I'll tell you how. You think in moves. Okay, now, everything in Dungeons & Dragons, you're still going to have to be familiar with it to run a good game. Okay, weapons have their own damage. Classes are going to escalate in hit points, and armor classes are going to be going up. People are going to be in the +7 range on their rolls and stuff like that. You're going to have ranges on things. You're going to have move distances. You're going to have rogues moving different distances than other people. It's all good. Using Dungeon World as a narrative guide isn't going to change any of that goodness. You guys hear that? I think there's a pterodactyl out there. So how are you going to apply the Dungeon World narrative technique into your D&D 5th edition game? You're going to think in terms of moves. Now, a lot of this is going to play out in practice, and it's going to take time. So don't expect to just be like, revolutionize your game and your dungeon worlding. It's not going to happen like that. So there's going to be 2 steps. The first step is in your preparation as a DM. So you're writing in your tome, right? And okay, I'm working on the Twin Dragons was the big encounter I just ran. So let's go to that. Oh boy. Okay. The Twin Dragons. So I designed a space, and I designed an AI chart with mirror stats between the Twin Dragons. So it's the players think it's one dragon teleporting back and forth at first, and then they have this terrifying realization there's actually 2 of them and they look identical except for this one scar. And they're fighting 2 dragons all of a sudden. So I've been designing these 2 characters and how this encounter is going to play out. It's over these rapids and there's a canyon, blah, blah, blah. You're going to do all that stuff. There's no getting out of it. But what I didn't do, so let's take the dragon's called Duragosa. One of them is Dura, the other's Gosa. So Dura's abilities include Crown of Madness, Fog Cloud, Chains of Iron, Claw, Breath Weapon, right? That's the D&D way of creating a monster. Now the Dungeon World way would be to say something like, drive a character mad, disappear into the mist, and intimidate with descriptions of the ancient world, okay? and attack as a dragon always does. Those would be like my 4 sort of actions that he does. Now, what are those exactly? Well, sure, you can have more detail written down for all that as you know, an awesome and thorough DM. But what you're doing when you're preparing these move descriptions, these little bullet points, is that you're giving yourself narrative cues that you can look to during the game. So let's say I'm sitting here, right, and I'm DMing. You guys are the players right now, and we're right here. Instead of me just having Crown of Madness written down, so I'd be like, okay, the Frozen King casts Crown of Madness. That's not bad. I mean, that doesn't suck or anything. But if instead I had him a bullet list of things he does, like actions he takes, it might be, you know, overwhelm a character with arcane mind power, or like crush the will of his foes with his ancient grief. Right? That's a pretty good one. So when the Frozen King's turn comes around, I say, all right, well, he reaches inside, looks at you, and crushes your mind with the weight of his ancient grief. That's pretty cool. That's better than saying I cast Crown of Madness. And that is the key to Dungeon World and why it's so cool. If you guys want to do the 2d6 success mechanic, do it. It's fine. If you want to stick with good old-fashioned d20s because rolling a 20 is super awesome, fine. What you're learning from Dungeon World is not mechanical, it's narrative.
Oh, I crush your mind with the weight of my ancient grief.
Anchor infernal, and I lift my ancestral weapon to defy you, etc. So, if you play Dungeon World, you're probably going to save some prep time and you're going to eat your content up quicker. If you keep playing D&D 5th edition, which is what I'm going to do, that's why I'm like trying to figure out a way to get even more creative with it and save myself more prep time. You're going to use the Dungeon World technique to build the flavor of your narrative conversation into your prep. A lot of you guys, I know, especially when you're new to dungeon mastering, are asking me these really tough esoteric, heady questions like, how do I make my game epic? Oh my God, dude, that is such a complex question. So I'm engaged with several of you on these conversations about the details of your particular campaign or adventures, ways that you can take common encounters or presentation of content and make it epic. And does it work? I don't know. You know, when the moment comes and the players are there and you're on the spot, and like, do you really like have the chutzpah to be like, I crushed your mind with the weight of my ancient grief? Do you really have it? You know, is the moment right? Not all of us are like, you know, badass actors and like all charismatic and hoopty-doopty. So we wind up saying, well, I cast Crown of Madness, right? If you follow the DungeonWorld way and make yourself a nice little bullet list when you're in the quiet of your sanctum and you're preparing the encounter, when you're at your most creative, that way, that cue is there for you, and if you need to, you can just read the bullet off. And I think in DungeonWorld, it's implied that you're reading those bullets off. You're reading the names of the moves. Start writing in your tome in those kinds of terms, you are going to have a cooler game. How much cooler? I don't know. That's up to you. But I know it's going to make mine cooler. So I'm going back to DungeonWorld. So I got my DungeonWorld 2 sheet over here, right? And this was all about all the mechanics that make DungeonWorld cool. How to do death, how to do hit points, how leveling up works, how armor works, how success works, how failure works, blah, blah, blah. It took me down until like over here somewhere to suddenly realize there's no wonder that there's no space measurement in this game. They don't need it. It's a narrative technique game. Now maybe I'm one of the slower kids in the class to finally realize that, but it's fun to share that realization with you guys because I know that you're all in there thinking, how do I combine multiple systems of RPGs to make D&D cooler? How do I do the research without getting all caught up in it? I'm a DM, so I have natural ADD, and I just want to move on to some other system so I can learn it and master it, but my players want to stay with the old thing. How do I make it interesting? Well, this is how you do it. So I'm going to move on to a fresh page here, and I'm going to take down what in DungeonWorld terms would be called a series of moves. You could still call them moves in D&D, but what they are is for each thing that you have, you're going to list its moves. And those moves are listed with interesting flair to the names. Have you ever noticed that it seems like the writers get to have all the fun? Because they get to name like feats, and they get to name spells, and they get to put all these cool little bits of flavor here and there. Now, if you find yourself as a DM bringing that flavor to the game by reading it out of the book, it's not that cool. That's what the players are doing. They're reading out of the book and capturing that tone. As the DM, you're taking it up another notch. Well, here's your chance to have the fun. You get to name all the moves. You get to name all the moments that happen. You don't say, I cast Crown of Madness anymore. That's a thing that a player would say. You say,
I crush your mind with the weight of my ancient grief.
lay out the rules that are involved with Crown of Madness, the spell. It's that simple. But you don't have to make up that dialogue on the spot. You got a bullet point right under the Frozen King that says that's the first thing he's gonna do. And you just read those bullet points off. So when you're doing your preparation, your bullet points are what have all the dopeness and all the flavor. I light the banner of my ancestors ablaze, for in the flames I find fury. DungeonWorld, and turn the moves mindset into how you narrate your D&D game. Damn, that is a valuable realization, and that is worth spending a month or two poring over the DungeonWorld book. So freaking do it, because I know if you're DMing, you're always looking for ways to make your game badass. I have one other editorial comment, and I think I've got about enough of this meat in me to get into it. To make this next point, I require the hammer of my ancestors. Oh Skull, grant me this boon. Ah, yes. Thank you, forefathers. I'm gonna put the hammer down on Watsy right frickin' now. Boom! That would be awesome to end the game session. Just like smash. Oh, ow, man, you can jab yourself right in the back with that big old spike, and that's what I just did. Yes. Thank you, forefathers. I'm gonna put the hammer down on WotC right frickin' now. Boom! That would be awesome to end the game session. Just like smash. Oh, ow, man, you can jab yourself right in the back with that big old spike, and that's what I just did. Putting the hammer down on WotC right now. Because I had another realization when I was reading through DungeonWorld over and over. And saying, man, why am I having so much fun reading this little paperback book? Why am I carrying it back and forth to work, reading it on my lunch break and like picking it apart and taking notes on it? I never do that with the DMG. I never do that with the Player's Handbook. Sure as hell don't do it with the Monster Manual. Like, what's going on? So once my players told me they wanted to stick with 5th edition, I had to go back to the 5th edition trifecta and take a look at those books again. Now for those viewers who have been around since the beginning, you saw that I did a 5th edition DMG review while I got totally blitzed on that High Gravity Wisdom Seeker beer. It was a funny kind of a troll video. I was basically just trolling the 5th edition DMG because it's the new thing, and it's just... Going back to it now after playing 5th edition for almost a year, this is why I gotta put the hammer down on WotC. I'm not sure I have a gentle way of saying this. The thing that makes DungeonWorld so much more fun to delve into, I did it again, to get into, explore, reread, learn, master. What is it about this that makes fantasy sound so fun again? And then I go over to the DMG and I start reading, and I'm just like, dude, I am so freaking bored. I'm Eugene O'Neill bored right now. What is this? I gotta say, the writing in the D&D 5th edition core books is boring. Now, is it bad? Maybe not. I mean, there's tons of tables, and they all kind of feel and sound like they were written by someone in a room who just kind of was instructed to write tables. Like, you know, give me a random furniture table. And the guy's like, okay, well, I gotta make a living somehow. I'll tell you, this is a chronic problem we're experiencing in all creative industries right now, and I'm not sure I'm ready to broach a topic this big. But the D&D 5th edition books feel like they are made by a corporation. There is no bazoom in there. There's no cha-cha in there. It's all what you're supposed to do when you make an RPG book. It's like the to-do list of items that we need in our new RPG book. Okay, well, we checked off all the items. I guess we did a good job. Whereas DungeonWorld is hungry. Those guys are indie. They're selling, you know, 5,000 to 10,000 copies of their book and they're stoked. WotC sells 2 million and they're like, oh, well, let's lay off half the staff because, Now, I know that I'm getting into an area that has nothing to do with how to play D&D well. But as a long-term player and as someone who believes in this shit and lives it, I gotta call these guys out, man. Quit making corporate product. Yes, it sells like hotcakes. But we are better than that. We're D&D players, man. We're smart. We're well-read. We've been playing this stuff since 1st, 2nd edition. There are homies sending me messages on the channel who are still playing 3.5. You know why? Because 3.5 is dope. It's deep, it's consistent, it's got tons of flavor, and some of the greatest minds of D&D were in their sort of sunset or best years, right as that was all coming together. Right? I mean, you want to go even just a little bit further back for some goodness? Freaking Dark Sun, yo. Greyhawk. Shit is awesome. Some people say the death of the old school era was Ravenloft, when things changed and started becoming more cartoony. But yo, go read late Ravenloft. It's awesome. It's like really fun. They're adding mechanics just at random. It's not just like furniture tables and stuff. I'm sorry, you guys, but on D&D 5th edition, you forgot your souls. You left them at the door because the books are written like someone trying to get a paycheck. Yeah, so there, eat that. So I recently had a viewer tell me, well, we're still playing 3.5, and I was like, hey man, you should give 5th edition a try. Its math, its mechanics are definitely improved. It's just the books are boring. So go get the books. And he said, well, not everybody wants to throw down the, like, you know, $150 to get all 3 books. And the guy makes a damn good point. Now, why is the business model so successful? Because you got to throw down $150. But DungeonWorld has got it, man. You throw in your 25 bucks and you get a book that you read and reread and pick through and then get all after and get all in there. The only reason I really pick through and get after my D&D books is to like bookmark certain pages, like the treasure tables and some other stuff. And the more that I give out stock magic items from the DMG, the more I hate them. I mean, it's cool that some people recognize them from back in the day and that I'm not necessarily responsible for their impact on the balance of the game. But honestly, you guys, I've been looking at the Ring of Protection for 30 years. Like, let's come up with some new stuff, risky stuff, weird stuff, or leave big blanks and challenge your users. But I can tell you what, man, the book does not tell you how to play D&D. None of the 3 books do. I also went back to a basic RPG. You guys remember that one, Basic Fantasy? That book suffers from a little bit of the same problem. It doesn't really tell you how to play. But DungeonWorld does a brilliant job of telling you how to execute the play session. Every book has example play sessions in it. It's too easy to troll me that way. You're not going to get away with it. DungeonWorld is the only one that says you're going to become a master of structuring a fantasy conversation. You are going to become the master of building people into ideas and extracting from them epic decisions and helping them to word those decisions in exciting ways. And you're going to use dice to help mix fate up. Ooh, roll 6, double 3s. That's just gross. I hope you guys all see the gravity of what I'm saying. I'm not just pinging WotC like, hey, you did a crappy job. We all got the trifecta. We bought the damn books, okay? But honestly, I don't think the best thinking in tabletop is happening in the corporate environment right now. Curran begins to kite the Frozen King, and he, in DungeonWorld, what would be a move? He taunts him with derisive comments. You're the son of a motherless goat. I'm gonna fill you so full of lead you'll use your dick for a pencil. I've seen rhino beetles with better suits of armor than you. I think that you're not the Frozen King, you're the de-thawed king, you Mr. Poopy Pants. And he's like, I'll crush you. Now, all Hankerin has to do is survive long enough to back across the bridge. Then Stills runs across and throws the switch. With all the strength in his body, throws the switch, activates the trap, smashes the Frozen King. No, he backs off the bridge. Stills pull the switch again. Hankerin jumps in, attacks him again. Realizes no more. As the bridge entirely, adding 10 to his damage roll when he activates the feat. And then him and the Frozen King are staring one another down. The Frozen King says, if I can't smite you with my sword, I'll burn you with lightning. But before he can, Alzheimer has got into position in front of the great stained glass window. The Frozen King turns. Alzheimer quickly looks up. And in DungeonWorld terms, he discerns reality. So he says, I'll use my knowledge of ancient arcane carvings to see what is the source and nature of the power of this stained glass window. Well, then you discern realities as he would do in DungeonWorld. He succeeds. It turns out this is the source of the Frozen King power, not a reflection thereof. Alzheimer lifts his tiny quill that he uses to write spells. Nothing more than a feather with a metal tip. He looks at the Frozen King for a moment. The Frozen King says, no! But before the Frozen King can take action, Stills jumps out into the way. Lightning bolt is cast by the Frozen King, but entirely absorbed by Stills, who falls dead. He rolls for his last breath in DungeonWorld terms. Making death saves, barely makes it. We'll give him a death save. 11, so he makes the first one, but he's down. And then Alzheimer smites the great stained glass window with the razor point of his spell writing quill, and a single crack extends up through the glass. Now we have a roll on our hands. Will the window shatter? In DungeonWorld, we would roll 2d6. In D&D, we would roll a d20. Tough choice. For the sake of the video being Dungeon World themed, we're going 2d6. So I want a 10 right now. Come on, baby! Oh! A 10 it is! I don't know if y'all can see that way over there, but boom! What you know about 10? 6 plus 4 more 4. So the crack rumbles up, the stained glass window shatters, and an empty, ice-cold suit of armor falls to the floor. And Hankerin hops across, realizes the armor is far too large to fit, but the sword is his. Now I bypassed a bunch of the math that would be involved. Even if I was playing Dungeon World, it would have taken a little bit more math than that. And when it's only one person being both the player and the bad guys, things go really quickly. But that's the narrative style you're looking for in your game. I use the blah of the blah to GBD. I rise up and chaka-cha with the da-da-da. You see how it's got a certain structure to the speech, and that's what you want to capture. D&D leaves you so flat and so dry in the way that it recommends how you talk about the game. I cast Magic Missile. He takes 4 damage. Wow, that was really narratively riveting. Boom! Oh shit. How to really get the flavor. How to keep it creative. A year is a long time to do anything. Ask the Karate Kid. He learned karate in like 2 weeks. We've been playing D&D for a year. We're only like 6th level. I mean, maybe I should have learned karate instead. So you're asking yourself, how can I keep this awesome? How can I make this fun? I don't want this to be a job. I got all this junk laying around. This has got to be fun. I don't want to have to do this. I want to do it. Oh, Watsy, I'm coming for you, man. It's time to cut the fat. You ought to like hire like 100 14-year-olds and have them write 6th edition. That would be my advice. Just let them go apeshit on that thing. Don't make them go to school either. Just like kidnap them, put them in a basement with like a ton of Skittles, Mountain Dew, pizza, and like 4 frozen turkeys. 3 girls and like 94 boys. No, don't do that. Don't do that. The Lord of the Flies. Let's just not do the whole kidnapping thing in general. That wasn't such a great idea. Let's leave them the freedom. Okay, so so let's let the 14-year-olds all. It can be between 13 and 19. They get to keep their freedom. They don't have to go in the basement, but they do get the Skittles, the Mountain Dew, and the pizza. The 4 frozen turkeys we're going to save for the 4 best riders in the group. They're going to receive a frozen turkey as payment. That will keep greed out of the picture. That's how you solve the problem. And you take the next 5 years to make 6th edition. So in 2020, D&D 6th edition drops, and it was written by a bunch of 13 to 19-year-olds whose only reward was being cool, and for 4 of them, a frozen turkey. There's your business model right there, Watsy. What have you been wasting time with? I mean, it's not like magic isn't paying the bills. That was a double negative. There's no place for double negatives in the world of Dungeon World. Dungeon World. Get out of here. Well, no, wait. By the rules, I have to finish the bottle. This is the bottle. You know, we're not just a bunch of scrubs around here. Yeah. Send a shout out to my man DM Scotty, who I know has been catching up on some of the videos. I'll stare you down. Why do we sing? We sing to kill the frozen king, and to use use the bridge trap to smash him with spikes. I hope this video gets a lot of likes. Skull, I require the helmet of a TIE fighter pellet. Hand me this boon. Ah, yes. It's back. I have you now. Oh, wait, no, that's Darth Vader. It's like they're doing this kind of stuff. It's no wonder they can never shoot anyone. They're controlling the entire TIE fighter with one little knob. Okay, be gone, TIE fighter helmet. Ha! For you guys. Yep. If this were a radio show, no one could see my glow. Alzheimer went up to the big window. Still self-sacrificed, uncharacteristic for a rogue. And then Lincoln lured him across the bridge, and that was the end, as we know. Some cheese. Let's get. Oh wait, I have to. I'm running out of battery. Oh crap. Okay, here we go. Battery thing's flashing. Done. You guys, thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. Strength, honor, and mead combine the narrative technique of DungeonWorld with D&D 5th edition, and your beard will taste like mead. I'm out. See you next time. Drunkens and Dragons. Boop, boop, boop. And all I transformed into was the end of the video.